In this episode of the podcast, we will dive into one of the important episodes in functional nutrition.
Than just keto equals good brain. We need to break it down, look at all the details, and really see what the science is telling us.
Okay, let's do it. First things first, though, what exactly is the ketogenic diet and how does it actually work? For those of us who haven't jumped on the keto train just yet.
Basically, the keto diet is a way of eating where you eat a lot of fat and very few carbohydrates. We're talking about really cutting down those carbs to something like 10% of your calories for the day, and then increasing your fat intake to about 70%. And protein makes up the other 20%.
Okay, so does that mean that bacon and butter are like your new best friends? I'm just kidding. But really, why such a big change in what we're eating? What's the point?
The whole goal is to make your body switch what it uses for fuel. Normally, your body runs on glucose, which it gets from carbohydrates. But on the keto diet, you're not eating many carbs, so your body goes into something called ketosis.
Ketosis sounds kind of intense.
It is a shift in how your body works, but the human body is really good at adapting. So in ketosis, your liver starts to break down fat into these molecules called ketones, and then these ketones become what your body and your brain use for energy.
Wow. So instead of running on carbs, our brains start running on ketones, which come from fat.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild, but
Right.
why would anyone want to do that? I mean, isn't the brain supposed to run on glucose?
That's what a lot of people think, but actually it turns out that the brain can function pretty well using ketones, and that's where things get interesting.
Okay. I knew there had to be a reason why people are so into this. So what are these supposed benefits of having our brains run on ketones instead of glucose?
Well, one of the most popular reasons people try the keto diet is to lose weight.
Right, keto's like this big weight loss thing. But does it really work?
So there's this study called Resting Metabolic Rate of Obese Patients Under Very Low-Calorie Ketogenic Diet. The researchers found that people who were obese and were on this very strict keto diet, a very low-calorie ketogenic diet, lost a lot of weight. I'm talking 20 kilograms in just 4 months.
20 kilograms in 4 months. That's a lot. But wait, was that all fat they lost or were they losing muscle too? Because usually when people lose weight really fast, they lose muscle along with the fat.
That's what's really interesting about the study. They mostly lost fat and didn't lose much muscle. This kind of goes against the idea that your metabolism slows down after you lose weight.
Metabolic adaptation, is that what it's called?
Yeah. It's the idea that your metabolism slows down after you lose weight, and that makes it hard to keep the weight off. But with the keto diet, it seems like something different might be happening.
So maybe keto is actually helping people keep their metabolism going strong even when they're losing weight. That would be big for people who are always struggling to keep the weight off.
Exactly. We don't know for sure why this happens yet. It could be the high protein or maybe the ketones themselves or a mix of things. But the results are promising for people who are trying to manage their weight.
That's interesting. Okay, so there might be benefits for weight loss.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the brain. You said that ketones can fuel the brain, but does that change how our brains work, like our memory or focus?
That's the big question, isn't it? To answer that, we need to look at the research on how keto affects our thinking and how our brain works.
Perfect, because one of the studies you sent me was really interesting. It's called Low Carbohydrate Weight Loss Diets, Effects on Cognition and Mood. Let's talk about that one. What did they find?
This study is interesting because it looks at how low-carb diets affect thinking. And one thing they found is that women who were on a low-carb diet didn't do as well on memory tests compared to women who ate a balanced diet. But there's an important detail here. These problems with memory only happen in the beginning when they first started the low-carb diet.
So like when people just start keto and their bodies are still trying to figure out this whole new way of eating?
Exactly. In this beginning phase, the body's glycogen stores, which is kind of like its emergency glucose reserves, are all used up.
So it's like their brains are suddenly low on their usual fuel and they go through this carb withdrawal. I can see how that would mess with memory. But does this mean that keto is bad for your brain in the long run?
Not necessarily. In fact, the study found that these memory problems got better after they started eating carbs again. Right? The brain is really good at adapting, and it seems like it can switch back and forth between using glucose and ketones for fuel depending on what's available.
So it doesn't sound like keto's going to like ruin your memory forever. But there might be like an adjustment period where you might feel a bit foggy. That makes me wonder, have you ever tried the keto diet yourself?
I have, yeah, just out of curiosity. I wanted to see what those initial changes in thinking felt like.
Interesting. And did you notice any changes in your memory or focus?
To be honest, I did feel kind of sluggish for the first few days, like my brain was moving in slow motion. But that went away, and I actually felt like my focus got better after I got used to it.
Huh. That's interesting. Maybe it's like a trade-off. You get a little worse memory at first, but then later your focus gets better. That makes me think of another thing from that study we were talking about. The people on the low-carb diet said they felt less confused and they were quicker on this one task compared to the people who ate a balanced diet.
It's true, the effects of the keto diet on the brain are pretty complicated. We're just starting to figure out how it all works. It's not just a simple good or bad. It's more like things in the brain get shifted around.
Okay, so we know that going keto can change how our brains work in some pretty interesting ways. But let's not forget about the possible downsides. We talked about those memory dips at the beginning, but are there any other potential risks or drawbacks, especially over the long term?
That's a really important question. We're still doing research on the long-term effects of the keto diet. But there are a few risks we should talk about. One concern is not getting enough nutrients. Because the keto diet cuts out a lot of fruits and veggies and whole grains, it can be hard to get all the vitamins and minerals your body needs.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it seems like any diet that tells you not to eat entire food groups could lead to not getting enough of certain things.
Absolutely. And this is especially important for some people like pregnant women or growing kids or people who already have some health issues. It's super important to talk to a doctor or a registered dietitian before making any big changes to your diet, especially if you're one of those people.
Good advice. I'm also thinking about getting enough fiber on a keto diet. I mean, with all those fruits and veggies, it seems like you could get constipated pretty easily.
You're right, fiber is really important for digestion. And a lot of keto-friendly foods don't have much fiber, so it's important to think about that and try to eat fiber-rich foods like leafy greens, nuts, and seeds.
Okay, so potential nutrient deficiencies and digestive issues are something to keep in mind. But what about the brain specifically? Are there any long-term risks to having our brains run on ketones instead of glucose? I mean, it sounds like a pretty big change.
It is a big change, and we need more research to fully understand what it means for brain health in the long run. Some experts are worried that it might affect mood and mental health, or maybe even make thinking worse in some people.
That's a little worrying. What kind of research would we need to do to figure out these risks and really understand how keto affects the brain long term?
We need big studies that look at people over a long period of time. These studies need to look at things like thinking, mood, and overall brain health in people who are on the keto diet for a while. And these studies should also consider things that are different for each person, like their genes, their lifestyle, and any health problems they already have.
So it sounds like there's still a lot we don't know about the long-term effects of keto on the brain. So it's probably a good idea to be careful, especially if you have any health issues. Speaking of different approaches, one of the things you sent me mentioned different types of keto diets. It's called the ketogenic diet, a detailed beginner's guide to keto. We've been mostly talking about the standard keto diet, the SKD, but are there any other types that are worth mentioning?
Yeah, there are a couple variations that might be good for certain situations or goals. One is called the cyclical ketogenic diet, or CKD.
Cyclical keto, what does that mean?
Basically, it means you go in and out of ketosis. So you follow the standard keto diet most of the time, but then you have times where you eat more carbs. These are usually planned out and might be around your workouts or on certain days of the week.
So it's like a mix, giving your body a break from strict keto. Why would someone want to do that?
The idea is that by eating more carbs for a short time, you can refill your muscle glycogen stores. And that can be good for athletic performance. Some people also feel like the cyclical approach is easier to stick with in the long run because it gives you more choices and flexibility.
That makes sense. It must be hard to follow such a strict diet for a long time without feeling like you're missing out on stuff.
Right. Now there's another variation called the targeted ketogenic diet, or TKD. With this one, you can eat a little bit of carbs around your workouts.
So when you eat the carbs is important.
Exactly. The goal is to give your body quick energy for the workout, but still stay in ketosis overall.
It sounds like both CKD and TKD are for people who are pretty active and need that extra boost from carbs for their workouts.
That's a good way to put it. It's important to remember, though, that CKD and TKD are more advanced and haven't been studied as much as the standard keto diet. So if you're new to keto, it's usually best to start with the SKD and see how your body reacts before trying these other versions.
Good advice. Now, I also noticed that one of the things we have today focuses on a specific group of people doing keto. It's called Vegan Keto Diet Guide. Benefits, foods, and sample menu. Combining keto with a vegan diet sounds incredibly hard, like maybe impossible. Is it even possible?
It is possible, but like you said, it takes careful planning and a really good understanding of both diets.
I can imagine. The keto diet already cuts out a lot of foods, and then you add in the vegan restrictions on top of that. It doesn't seem like you'd have many options left.
It's true, the food choices are more limited, but it can be done. Remember, the key to keto is to get most of your calories from fat and keep carbs very low. On a regular keto diet, people eat a lot of animal products like meat, cheese, and butter to do this. But on a vegan keto diet, you have to get those fats from plants.
So things like avocados, nuts, seeds, coconut oil, and olive oil are your go-to foods.
Exactly. And those are all healthy fats, which is a plus. But the hard part about vegan keto isn't just getting enough fat, it's also making sure you get enough protein while still keeping the carbs low.
Right, because beans and legumes, which are usually good sources of protein for vegans, are kind of high in carbs. So what are some good vegan keto protein options?
Tofu tempeh and some types of nuts and seeds are good choices. And there are some vegan meat alternatives made from things like soy protein or seitan that can fit into a keto diet. But you have to be really careful to check the labels and make sure they don't have too many carbs or added sugars.
This makes me think about our listeners who might be thinking about trying vegan keto. What advice would you give them, especially when it comes to those potential nutrient deficiencies?
That's a super important point. Any diet that's really restrictive, but especially one that combines two like this, makes you more likely to not get enough of certain nutrients. Vegans in general often need to take vitamin B12 supplements because it's mostly found in animal products. And on a keto diet, you're also not eating a lot of fruits and veggies that have lots of different vitamins and minerals.
So working with a registered dietitian or a nutritionist who knows a lot about plant-based diets is probably a must for anyone thinking about doing this right, just to make sure they're getting everything they need and staying healthy.
Absolutely. It's really important to get personalized advice to create a meal plan that's both healthy and enjoyable. Because let's be real, no matter how good a diet is for you, if you can't stick to it, it's not going to help.
Very true. Okay, so we've covered a lot today, from the basics of the keto diet to the potential benefits and risks, and even different variations like cyclical keto and vegan keto. But before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. Those ketones, those little molecules that become our brain's fuel when we're in ketosis. We know they can power the brain, but could they actually be good for the brain beyond just being an alternative fuel source?
That's a question that's got a lot of scientists really excited. And based on the research we have so far, the answer seems to be a cautious yes.
Cautious, yes. What does that mean?
It means there's some promising evidence that ketones might have some healing potential for the brain. But we're still in the early stages of research. We need more studies to confirm these findings and really understand what it means in the long run.
Okay, but what kind of healing potential are we talking about? What are some specific ways that ketones might be good for the brain?
One area of research is looking at how ketones might protect the brain from damage. Some studies have shown that ketones can reduce oxidative stress and inflammation in the brain.
Oxidative stress and inflammation. Those don't sound good.
They're not, especially for the brain. These processes are involved in a bunch of different brain disorders like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and even stroke.
So it's like ketones are like little bodyguards for our brain cells, protecting them from harm.
That's a great way to put it. There's also research looking at how ketones might help mitochondria work better.
Mitochondria. Remind me what those are again.
Think of mitochondria like tiny power plants inside your cells. They're responsible for making the energy your brain needs to work. And in conditions like Alzheimer's, these mitochondria often don't work properly, which means the brain cells aren't getting enough energy.
Okay, I remember now. So if ketones can help those mitochondria work better, could that maybe slow down or even reverse some of the cognitive decline we see in these diseases?
That's what we're hoping to find out. But again, we need more research to understand the long-term effects. What we do know is that ketones can cross the blood-brain barrier. That's a protective shield that stops a lot of things from getting into the brain. This means ketones can get directly to brain cells and maybe have those healing effects we were talking about.
That's really cool. It's like ketones have a VIP pass to the brain while other molecules are stuck outside.
Exactly. And that's why so many people are excited about how they might be used to treat brain disorders. But to be clear, the research is promising, but it's not definite yet. We need bigger studies that last longer to know for sure if the keto diet or ketone supplements can really help with these conditions.
Right. It's important to remember that just because something seems promising in early research doesn't mean it will turn into an effective treatment. But this is definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, before we get too carried away with all this talk about ketones and brain health, I have a more down-to-earth question for you. If someone is thinking about trying the keto diet, what would you tell them based on everything we've talked about today?
That's a great question, and I get asked that a lot. I think The most important thing is to be balanced when you're thinking about the keto diet or any change to your diet. It's not a magic solution and it's not right for everyone. So it's not like a quick fix or a guaranteed way to make your brain better.
So what are some things people should think about before they try keto?
The most important thing is to talk to your doctor, especially if you have any health problems already. The keto diet can really change how your body works, and it can affect how some medications work too. So you need to make sure it's safe for you.
Okay. Health check first. Got it. What else?
Think about why you want to try the keto diet. What are your goals? Are you trying to lose weight or maybe improve how your brain works or manage a health problem? Your goals will help you decide if keto is right for you, and if it is, what type of keto diet might be best.
Right, because we talked about those different versions like standard keto, cyclical keto, and targeted keto. Choosing the right one probably depends on what you need and what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly. And you also need to be honest with yourself about whether you can actually stick to the diet. The keto diet is strict. It means changing your eating habits a lot. And it can be tough to keep up, especially when you're out with friends or eating at restaurants.
I guess willpower is pretty important here.
It definitely is.
Uh-huh.
And be ready for some possible side effects. A lot of people get what's called the keto flu when they first start.
Keto flu, what's that?
It's a bunch of symptoms like headache, fatigue, nausea, and constipation that can happen when your body is getting used to using ketones for fuel instead of glucose. It usually doesn't last long, but it can be pretty awful for some people.
Not the best way to start keto, that's for sure.
No, it's not. But for a lot of people, the potential benefits are worth dealing with those initial discomforts.
Okay, so let's go over it one more time for our listeners. If you're thinking about trying the keto diet, talk to your doctor. Figure out your goals. Be realistic about whether you can stick to it, and be prepared for some challenges along the way.
That's a good summary. And I would add one more thing. Do your research. There's a lot of wrong information out there about the keto diet. Don't just follow the latest trend or believe everything you see online.
Right, because as we talked about, the research is still going on. We're learning more about the keto diet all the time, both the good and the bad.
Exactly. So be critical, think for yourself, and make the best decision for you based on your own needs and situation.
Great advice. Now I want to change gears a little and ask you something that's been on my mind throughout this whole conversation. If we could somehow make the keto diet even better, like get rid of those early memory problems and really boost those brain benefits we talked about, could it actually be used to make everyone's brains work better? Not just for people with health problems, but for everyone.
That's a really interesting question, and it's something that scientists are starting to look into. It's still early, but the idea of using keto or maybe even ketone supplements to make our brains work better is pretty exciting.
It sounds kind of futuristic. But how would we even start to figure this out? What kind of research would we need to do to make this a reality?
Well, first we need to do more than just see that there's a connection between the keto diet and changes in the brain. We need studies that can really show us exactly how ketones affect how the brain works. We need to know how they interact with brain cells, how they change neurotransmitter activity, and how they affect the overall metabolism of the brain.
So we need to get up close and personal with those ketones and see how they're changing things at the level of the brain cell.
Exactly. And we would also need to use advanced brain imaging techniques to see how the brain's activity and structure change over time when people are on keto diets or taking ketone supplements.
It would be like watching a movie of the brain as it gets used to running on ketones.
That's a great way to think about it. And we also need to consider that everyone is different. Not everyone reacts to the keto diet in the same way.
Right, because we all have different genes, different gut bacteria, and different lifestyles. All those things could affect how our bodies use ketones and how our brains respond.
Exactly. So to really unlock the potential of keto for making our brains work better, we need to move towards personalized approaches. Imagine a future where we can create keto diets or even ketone supplements that are specifically designed to optimize each person's brain function based on their own unique needs.
Now that's a future I'd like to see. A future where we can use what we eat to boost our brain power, not just treat diseases. It seems like the research we have now is just the beginning of what's possible.
I totally agree. And that's what makes this field so fascinating. Every new study opens up more questions and possibilities.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. It's clear that the ketogenic diet and how it affects our brains is a really complex issue. There's the potential for both good and bad, and we need a lot more research to really understand the long-term effects.
But I think the most important thing to remember is this: what we eat matters. It matters for our bodies and it matters for our brains. And the more we learn about how diet affects our brains, the better equipped we'll be to make choices that help keep our brains healthy.
Well said. So to all our listeners out there, keep those questions coming and keep exploring. There's so much to learn out there, and it's all incredibly interesting. Until next time, happy deep diving.